how to create a money-making menu. Bill, this is a really big topic that you have helped a lot of people out with.
Today we're going to talk about keeping your menu simple. We're going to talk about how to cost out that menu so you know it makes money. We're going to talk about speed of service.
And at the end, we're going to talk about order-taking procedures and suggestive selling. These are really important questions that can impact your bottom line, so let's dive in. All right, Bill, let's dive right into it. Creating a money-making menu is such a huge topic, such a key topic for people. So what are some of the keys that you give to people for how to do this?
Making a menu, people make that such a complicated process. All you got to do is say, well, number one, something you're passionate about. So that's easy. What are you going to be excited to say when somebody says, what's your best thing? And then you tell them. Your face should light up. You should have a big smile. You should be able to explain with enthusiasm whatever that product is. So what matters to you as a business owner now is, can I make money with it?
Right.
And so we got to break it down. We got to talk about how much does it cost every single ingredient. Those ingredients have to be portioned, and they have to be consistently portioned so you can produce the same product time after time after time.
Right.
Hopefully millions of times. And then you have to look at not only the cost, but what's the yield on every product that you're putting in there. Some things is easy. You buy salt, it's 1-to-1.
Right.
Something like pepperoni, you got to slice it, you're losing a little bit if you slice it yourself. If you cook brisket, a whole lot of people do barbecue. You start out with 10 pounds, but you don't end up with 10 pounds.
Right.
You end up with maybe 5 pounds. So you got to understand what that cook down or that loss process is, because that impacts your cost, and then it impacts your profitability. And then, of course, on the other side of the cooking process, there is waste. We're going to make mistakes. As much as we'd like to think we're perfect, we are going to drop a bun on the floor. We're going to burn something. We're not going to be able to serve something off that food that we've been preparing. So we have to control that waste. All of those components go into food cost, and you got to understand that. So when someone says to me, how do we create that perfect menu? We've got to understand the food cost. Got to understand the recipe cost, because those are two different things. And people don't understand that. A recipe cost is when we're sitting down at the kitchen table and we're writing down, I'm going to do biscuits. So we got a biscuit, we got eggs, we got cheese, we got bacon. Okay, so we got those ingredients, but we've got to wrap it, we've got to have napkins. All those things get added up.
Right.
And we go, okay, it's going to cost us, $1.75. And then what are we going to charge for it? So now we have a recipe cost. Food cost is not figured out that way. Food cost is, you start with an opening inventory. So that means you physically have counted everything that's on that food truck. How many pounds of bacon, how many pounds of sausage, how many biscuits do you have if you're using a frozen biscuit, or if you're making biscuits, how many pounds of flour, how much buttermilk, how much shortening. So you're counting all that stuff. Then at the end of the week, you've gone through the sales process, got to count it again. What's left? The difference in what you started with plus what you purchased minus what's left, that's your food cost.
Right.
Because it's gone.
Right.
There's no, well, it should only have been 25%. Well, when you go do that math, it could be 30 or 35%. There's the problem.
Right.
So then we start to look at waste. What's the difference in that food cost, recipe cost, and then we add the waste in. It should be really close to the actual food cost. If it's not, we got to figure out why. As a business owner, I own all this food, so if I want a hamburger today, I'll make me a hamburger. Well, that's awesome. But unless you ring it up and then free it off, because you don't want to pay, you don't want to pay for your own food, but you still got to ring it up so it's tracked on inventory.
Right.
So that you have relieved the inventory of the burger and the patty and all the condiments. At least you know you haven't lost it. Someone hasn't stolen it. Someone didn't give it away. But if you don't know that, then you're left with, well, I started with this much food. I have this much food left over. Where did it all go? That becomes the problem. So to create that profitable menu, you've got to have those numbers first and be serious about it every single week. Then we can talk about how to lay out a menu and engineer the menu so that it becomes attractive to the guest.
Right. Well, and if people don't know those numbers initially, when there is a problem, you won't be able to know what the solution needs to be. And so we see so many operators get hung up at that stage because they know there's a problem, but they have no idea why that problem is occurring, and so they don't know how to fix it.
Yep.
So that is a huge part of that. And then I'll ask you something that you touched on in the beginning. You said do something that you're passionate about, and there's positives and negatives that come with that, because we've seen operators who are very passionate about something, but their customers don't share that same passion. But they're so emotionally attached to that dish, they refuse to change it. How do you suggest somebody go through that? Because as a chef or as a cook, you might love doing that one thing, but as a business, you're not going to make it doing that one thing. So what mindset should somebody have as they're establishing what their menu really is going to be? How should they approach that?
What we recommend is when you have that passionate idea, you got to test it on other people, people that don't have an emotional attachment to you. If you test it on your family, there's a couple of problems. Number one, they're not going to try to hurt your feelings. The other thing is family units tend to have the same palate.
Right.
So if there's a certain spicing level, for instance, the whole family is going to love that spicing level. You take it out to strangers, they may not. It may be too lightly spiced, or it could be the other way, too heavily spiced. So you got to test the food on people that don't have that vested interest, and then tweak the recipe to them. Because your goal as a business owner isn't to share the food. Because if that's your goal, go work in a soup kitchen.
Right.
And share it to a whole bunch of people that would be super happy to eat it. Your goal is to share something you are enthusiastic about, but to make money.
Right.
So the making money process has to temper all of your decisions. So if you test it and the testees don't like the food or give you comments, tweak the recipes. And then you may have to reevaluate your pricing based on those tweaks. They may have made it more efficient for you, or they may have made it less efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And we see that all the time. If somebody's willing to be open to that their main staple thing isn't necessarily the fan favorite, if they're open to that feedback, then changing that can be a great alternative. We sold a trailer to a customer, and he really thought he was going to have this main dish, and so that everybody was going to love. And he had his kids work on the food truck with him. And so he had his kids in charge of side dishes. And he had the standards and all that stuff, so they could, as long as they followed that, they could do it. And he had a light bulb moment go off when he was at an event. And he was standing there doing nothing because no one was ordering the main dish. And his kids were working like crazy fulfilling orders on this side dish. Right. And he had to make a choice in that moment. His heart was crushed a little bit because what he thought was going to be amazing, people didn't want it. In the afterthought, the side item that he added to the menu was crushing it. And so he actually evaluated that. He did what he could to adjust the equipment on his trailer to make the side item his main offering. Killed it, did so well with it that he came back and got a second trailer from us geared just toward that dish. And now that he knew that that's what people wanted, he wanted to have an efficient setup. And he got so good at it, then he was plating every 30 seconds. Talk about a money-making menu. Now he was incorporating the things that you're talking about, making money hand over fist, but it also took that openness. He wasn't sitting there going, well, I need to figure out how to make more people buy the dish I love. He was reacting and responding to what people displayed that they really liked. And so he created a very successful menu by listening to his customers and letting them direct. And so let's say someone has gone through that process and what you're talking about, they know their costs, they know what their main item is going to be. Now let's get into what you're talking about of menu engineering and speed of service and all those other aspects that go into actually making money as we are selling this food.
Okay. Once you've got the the things you mentioned, the cost down, and you know what you're going to sell, and you feel confident that people are going to buy it, you got to display that list of whatever's on your menu in a way that makes people, number one, can figure out what they want quickly, and then number two, they're focused in on the things you want to sell. So you can't just write a list and go, here's what we sell.
Right.
Because people will read the list and not really focus in on one or two things. We want them to focus in. We want them to read the list to a point and then go, okay, that's what I want. So how we do that? In most menus, and this has been well researched, billions of dollars have been spent on this, people read the menu in one of three ways. They either read it right, or left, and then center, or left, right, center, or center, left, right. They all start in one of those three places. So in those three places is where you've got to have something you want to sell. Mm-hmm. And it should be high profit and something you can do quickly. You don't want to put that 15-minute cook time product there where people are going to, oh, that's what I want. So if it's a high profit item, it goes in one of those, they call it the golden triangle, one of those 3 points. And people will notice it. That's what they'll read. Now, if you want to even make it more noticeable, you put a frame around it. Mm-hmm. So now it's separated from all the other stuff on the menu. It's got a frame. You can colorize it different. You know, it's got different font colors than the whole rest of the menu, so that makes them notice it.
Right.
It may be the only product you have up there with a picture. Mm-hmm. Pictures will sell. But pictures can't sell if there's 30 pictures.
Right.
Because it's the same, it's a wall of pictures. I can't decide. That slows down your speed of service because they get decision paralysis. Mm-hmm. Well, this looks good, and this looks good, and this looks good, but they don't know which one they want. So they stand there. And then you start to get questions, and this is what really upsets a lot of food truck owners. Somebody will say, what you got that's good? Mm-hmm. What they're telling you is, your menu is not understandable to me, or I can't find it. So what do you suggest? And they really don't care. They just want to know something so they don't have to decide or read a bunch of stuff. And you should already have that answer. It should be a high profit item that has quick speed of service. You don't have to love it at all.
Right.
But it's the best thing we sell because it makes me a whole bunch of money.
Right. Well, we have a lot of people who come to us and they say that, that they want to take kind of the Cheesecake Factory approach, right? So if you ever go to Cheesecake Factory and the menu's like
30
20
pages.
It's intense. Okay. But the concept behind it is that what a lot of our customers are thinking is that if they offer a wider variety of food, they'll attract a wider variety of people, and so they'll sell a lot more in total. How do you respond to people who have that mindset? Because I can get it to somebody who isn't experienced with this, I can understand that way of thinking. But as you and I both know, and we've just seen over and over and over and over again, that's not the best way to make money. So how do you coach people through that mindset to get them, and where do they need to end up?
Well, we'll start with where they need to end up, because that's the good beginning spot. You need to have 5, at most, main item sellers. Yeah. And 5 really is too many. You want to think about a burger. That's one. Now, you can do a lot of varieties with burgers, but it's still one. Mm-hmm. You might do a different type of sandwich, different meat. So that's 2 sandwiches, maybe a 3rd sandwich. And then can be variety within there, so it looks like you have a big menu, but you still only have a few things. So when someone comes to me and says, I want to be the Cheesecake Factory, which I've had people say that, just like you have, I tell them, where are you going to store it? Okay. How are you going to control the waste? Because Cheesecake Factory does a ton of volume.
Right.
And volume number one, volume hides a whole lot of mistakes. Wasting $10 worth of food at Cheesecake Factory doesn't even impact their decimal points on the percentage.
Right.
You waste $10 on a food truck and your food cost is maybe up a whole percent. That's a problem. So you can't store it. You can't possibly sell it. Cheesecake Factory's got many, many employees back in that kitchen you don't ever see. You see the one server. Mm-hmm. She ain't making the food.
Right.
So you don't have the ability. There's no point. And people will still fight me on that. Well, I don't want to sell everything Cheesecake Factory. I only sell 6, 7, 8, 10 things. I tell them, here's what Domino's did back in the day. Okay, so Domino's is a big pizza chain. They know their business. And I will ask them, what do you think an operator at Domino's would do if their sales weren't where they needed to be? What do you think they would do? And eventually they'll come around to, they increase their delivery area, or they increase their menu. No, they didn't. Back then, Domino's sold pizza. Didn't have breadsticks, didn't have chicken wings, didn't have any of that other nonsense. They had pizzas, a whole bunch of variety of pizzas, but they had pizza. What they would do, and this was a corporate decision, whenever a franchisee was struggling, the recommendation was to reduce the delivery area. What does that do? Improves the speed of service.
Right. Right.
So now they're getting the food to the people quicker, so they're more likely to repeat order.
Yes.
And they build the sales that way.
Yeah, we talk about that. When I do coaching, it's we call it radical niching, right? Where you actually figure out something that you're really, really good at, and you focus on that. And so, but by doing that, you become so good at it that anybody who wants that thing is going to think of you for that thing. And so it makes you the go-to person for that item. And so, like what you're talking about, like narrowing down your focus will actually expand what you're able to do financially on your truck. And it has this ripple effect, because exactly what you're saying. People who step up to the window are ordering faster. You're plating the food faster and getting it out to them. And so your line is moving quicker when you're at a big event, things like that. Quick moving lines attract more people. Yep. When you go through something like a Chick-fil-A, who is known for having very fast service, if there are 10 cars at the drive-thru, you actually don't think that much of it, because you know that you're going to get through it quickly. Versus, I'm not going to name any restaurants, but there's plenty of other fast food restaurants that if there's 10 cars in the drive-thru, there's no way you're going there, because you know it's going to take forever to get through, because they haven't nailed that part of it. And so it's the same concept with a food truck. I'm not going to stand in line at a food truck that's the line's hardly moving at all, especially if I'm at an event. Like, I only want to pause and eat for a little bit, and I want to get back to the event. And so whoever can, get some chicken tenders in a basket the fastest, that's where I'm going to go. So that speed of service is going to be such a key component to it. And when we pare the menu down, that allows us to speed that up so much more. And now if you know everybody's going to order one of 2 things or one of 3 things, you can be cooking those things ahead of time and not worry about the waste that's going to go out. And so then now all of a sudden plating just gets that much more fast, because you've got stuff already ready to go and hand out the window. And so when we talk about that concept of creating a money-making menu, that's one of the, as counterintuitive as it can be for some people, that's one of the main ways to do it, is just pare it down and make it simple for people. And so if people have done that, they've pared it down, they've made it simple, they understand menu engineering. Are there any other things that they can do to increase their profits or create a money-making menu?
Probably when someone asks that kind of question, we're going to talk about more details. So we've got the menu, the way somebody can read really quickly. Okay, but we got to still help them through that process. So what I recommend is everything has a system. So the cashier has exactly what they should be saying, and they should say the same thing over and over and over. Now, it sounds like that would be boring, but it's not. I worked at many different fast food restaurants. So there would be many times where Bill was stuck answering the drive-thru window. And I got complimented so many times on, "You sound like a radio announcer." And it wasn't because I was trying to, it's just I would be bored with how I would sound. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to sound boring. So hi, welcome to Burger King. Would you like to try a Whopper value meal today? And they would be stunned, number one, that I said the whole thing.
Right.
Usually getting, "Can I take your order, please?" And they're so boring that they don't want to be there. And they would say, well, no, I don't want a Whopper value meal, but I do want. So they would match my energy. So now they're getting faster. And the process would be, welcome to the food truck. Would you like to try something? And the person has got to answer the question because we're trained to answer questions. No, I don't want that, but I do want. Okay, would you like to try something that complements that menu? So now you're suggestive selling. A lot of people get confused on suggestive selling. They think it's an add-on.
Right.
So if you order a hamburger, do you want cheese on it? That's an add-on.
Right.
Suggestive selling is, would you like fries with that? Would you like a dessert with that? Would you like a drink with that? We're going to round the meal out. So we're putting that higher ticket item on there. But you got to be sensible about it.
Right.
You can't overwhelm them with questions. This drives Melissa, my wife, crazy. We go to Taco Bell. They're doing AI now. And the AI's volume is way up there. The AI has not been trained on how it should answer the window.
Right.
But it will ask you anything else with that. So if you have a pause, it's got to fill in that gap. Anything else with that? That's not a suggestive sell. That's an annoyance.
Right.
Yeah. So it goes, welcome to the food truck, list the order, read the order back. Reading the order back, number one, verifies it's correct,
Yep.
and then gives the kitchen time to produce it. They have to have time. Cashiers, a good cashier can go way faster than the best cooks. No matter how much they anticipate food, they can't physically do what a cashier can because all they're doing is talking and punching buttons.
Right.
So then after you've suggested sold, you've read the order back, then you're going to go through that change process, cash or credit, here's your change, whatever. That's buying time, but it can be done within a minute.
Right.
So that's the goal, is to move the line every minute. The line can be 60 people deep as long as every minute they're moving forward, they see progress.
Right.
They don't mind. But if the line doesn't move for 4 or 5 minutes, they're starting to look at what other line is shorter. Where can I go to get fed?
Right. And that's kind of a pro tip as we dive more into that nitty-gritty level, is that having one spot to order and a separate spot to pick up can play a key part in that. Because if someone's ordering and then they're standing there waiting for their food to come out, it's so inefficient. It keeps the line long, and it keeps, you might be delaying future orders because they're not moving out of the way. And so and we recommend as much as possible to create significant space between the two. You might have one window at one end of your food truck or trailer and another window at the other end, so that it's a clear differentiator. Sometimes people do an order window on one side and pick up on another side. Whatever that looks like, having those two things separated keeps that line moving quickly and helps your flow to be much smoother as you're operating. Okay, so all that's really helpful. What's one parting tip that you would have for people wanting to create a money-making menu?
I think that the money-making menu is a good place to start, but there's also going to be the workflow. You talked about having space in between the order-taking window and the pickup window. Whatever the terminology is, that space makes it easier for the guests on the outside, but it should make it easier on the people on the inside. The food should flow. The employees should not. So we want the food to move.
Yep.
And if it starts on one end of the food truck, and it doesn't matter which end, as long as the food is all moving in one direction, it makes an efficient flow. And as an owner, you'll notice when there's a bottleneck, wait a minute, we're backed up here because the food has ceased to flow.
Right.
But if you have everybody going back and forth, you never really notice when something's amiss because we still got people moving.
Yep.
But there's no food coming off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's where design becomes so important. And we design with stations in mind. So we do grids within our designs. And so we'll say, hey, this is station 1, this is station 2, 3, and 4. And so station 1 might be order taking, and station 2 and 3 might be cooking, and then initially taking it out of the fryers or off the griddle, whatever, onto a plate or a holding area. And then, then they're going to do the first portion of the plate. So the hamburger or whatever might go on there. And then it gets moved over to station 4, and that's where someone's adding chips and a drink and handing it out the window, right? And so the order taker might own stations 1 and 4, and the person cooking might own stations 2 and 3. But that keeps them from crossing over. They
Right.
both know what their role is. If the person who's responsible for 1 and 4 is sitting there and sees a plate at 4 and it's not going out the window, like they know that's on them, and they jump right on it and get it out the window. And so creating that workflow like you're talking about and being really intentional as you set things up is such a key part of being efficient, and it helps. That's a big part of helping your menu to actually be profitable. Sometimes the menu isn't the problem at all. It's your efficiency and your service that can be the problem.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. That's really, really helpful information, and so I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
Oh, no problem. It's my pleasure as always.
Yep.